should be going to the dissent. The thesis of the dissent is pretty simple. The affirmative has admitted in cross-ex that they will remove troops from Afghanistan. Removing troops from Afghanistan causes them to be deployed elsewhere. Our link evidence indicates that if they were deployed elsewhere, they'd be deployed in Eastern Europe. They have not contested this fundamental claim that they would be deployed in Eastern Europe. The problem with deploying them in Eastern Europe, however, is that it creates tension between the United States and Russia, and that sort of tension causes a nuclear war because Russia perceives a military threat from the United States. He makes a couple of arguments. His first argument is that troops are leaving Iraq right now, but our evidence already accounts for this. It was written relatively recently. Moreover, those troops will go to Afghanistan because COIN requires more troops than we currently have, which means only ending the COIN mission leads to troops leaving Afghanistan and going into Eastern Europe. His next argument is that it has to be a question of funding. That argument doesn't make sense, for two reasons. First, our link evidence specifies it is the number of troops that go into Eastern Europe that causes the link to the DISAD. But second, and more importantly, ending the COIN mission would necessarily free up money. In the cross-ex of the 1AC, they indicated that COIN requires a great number of activities from more troops. If we were to decrease COIN missions, we would not only free up those troops, which means we wouldn't have to pay for their salary or would have to pay for the equipment that they use, we would also decrease the missions, which means we wouldn't have to pay for counterintelligence operations as well as presence operations. Both of those would mean that money would be cycled back into Eastern Europe. His next argument is that Middle East instability is a bigger internal link to a war, but that's not true, for a couple of reasons. First, the Balkan region has historically been more contentious than the Middle East because there are more political problems dividing up ethnicities. This is why we've had multiple civil wars in the Balkans, while the Middle East has generally not boiled over into larger political problems as it has in the Balkans. Moreover, geopolitical incentives will create tensions over the Baltics in the next decade that risk a major conflict. This is Friedman in 2009. The reabsorption of Belarus and Ukraine into the Russian sphere of influence is more or less a given in the next 5 years. When that happens, Russia will have roughly returned its borders with Europe between the two world wars. The real flashpoint will be the Baltics. The Northern European plain is a smooth ride for invaders. A European invader can move due east to Moscow or to St. Petersburg in the northwest. During the Cold War, the distance from St. Petersburg to NATO's front line was more than 1,000 miles. Today, the distance is about 70 miles. This explains the strategic nightmare Russia faces in the Baltics. The Europeans are most likely too far into the decadent cycle to have the energy to take advantage of the situation. The Russians are not going to risk their national security on that assumption, however. For a country that was invaded 3 times in the last 200 years, the comfortable assumption that NATO and its members are no threat is not something it can risk. The Russians are certainly paranoid, but that doesn't mean that they don't have enemies or that they are crazy. The Russians can live with a neutral Baltic region. Living with a Baltic region that is part of NATO and close to the Americans, however, is a much more difficult pill to swallow. This means also that it is more likely that a nuclear war will occur as a result of American influence within the Balkans than a lack of stability in Afghanistan, especially if we draw out from Afghanistan. If we withdraw from Afghanistan, it is more unlikely that Russia will find a reason to attack the United States as a result of instability. He indicates that troops are being shifted right now, but you should prefer our link evidence because it quotes the Undersecretary to the State Department in charge of these things. Also, the United States will shift military to Eastern Europe. New bases are being built right now. Balmasov in 2009. U.S. Army bases will appear on the Black Sea coast in Bulgaria and Romania. About $50 million will be assigned to build the base in Romania, and the Pentagon plans to spend $60 million more for the same purpose in Bulgaria. Over 4,000 U.S. military men are expected to serve at the two bases, 1,600 in Romania and 2,500 in Bulgaria. The authorities of the two nations expect that the U.S. military men will settle there for a long time. The appearance of Army bases in Bulgaria and Romania corresponds to the plans of the United States administration to relocate troops in foreign countries. This means that they don't have the ability to get out of the link debate. Also, our evidence, our uniqueness evidence, was written more recently than theirs. It's a reason that you prefer our evidence. Also, even if they win 100% of the case, and we win 100% of the dissent, we vote negative because we outweigh it.
I can also ask the floor.
Yes.
Do you have any evidence about how many troops we would increase in Eastern Europe?
We do not have evidence about the number of troops they increase, although our link evidence indicates a great number of troops would set off the link. The cross-ex of the 1AC indicated that you reduce troops by a substantial margin, and in order to be topical, you have to decrease.
How have you answered our argument? How have you answered our argument that we are currently withdrawing troops from Iraq, where we have even more troops already there?
Well, there are actually two answers to that argument. The first answer was that our evidence already accounts for this. We had planned to withdraw those troops, and those troops are coming home right now. The second argument is, even if they aren't coming home, they'd be going into Afghanistan because COIN requires a huge number of troops. That means that you cycle troops from both Iraq and Afghanistan because you end the COIN mission.
All right. So, but if they're coming home right now, how are they being cycled into Afghanistan? I don't see how these line up.
Well, there's actually a couple of reasons. The first is that in order to maintain troop presence in a country like Afghanistan, you need to actually have 3 times the number of troops than you have in the actual country. Troops are being trained, they are sent home, and they are literally in the country, which means that reducing an amount of troops frees up 3 times as many troops as the amount that you've reduced.
Okay. And so they're all going from Iraq home, or they're going from Iraq to Afghanistan?
Both.
Both, okay. Now, your evidence, what's the current state of affairs in Eastern Europe? Are more troops going there or more troops leaving?
Our uniqueness evidence indicates that our troops are leaving despite some plans to
troops have been
maybe increase
leaving.
the amount
How
of
many
bases.
troops have been leaving? How many did there used to be, and how many are there now?
I'm not entirely sure how many there used to be. My guess is somewhere around 20,000. But now there are less than half that.
Okay, so if they're less than half that, and we increase, let's say, back to 20,000 or a little bit more, why would that trigger the link when
You
had 20,000?
would increase more than 20,000 because you free up more than 20,000 troops. Like I said,
would they
you free
all go
three-
there?
Yes, the reason that we withdrew is because we didn't have enough troops to maintain a presence there. You
Okay.
solved that problem.